Yeah, hello everybody who is already here in this webinar. I'm happy to have you here. My name is Andreas. I'm the CEO of the Semantic Web company. And this afternoon or this morning, depending where you are, we will take a look on latest developments around PoolParty Semantic Suite. There are a couple of, let's say, hot topics I'd like to discuss today with you. Some of you might be familiar with the proceeding of a PoolParty webinar. So in the first 30 to 45 minutes, I'd like to present you new developments around our product and keep the microphones closed. But I would be happy if you stayed the whole time to spend some minutes together with me later after the first round to discuss. I will open up the microphones and you can also leave questions if you like. There's a questions sector in this software built in. So please type in questions if you would like to get them answered. And you will also find 4 files as a handout, mainly the slide deck I will present. And then you will also find a video I will talk about later and a dedicated slide deck about SKOS-XL you can also find. So yeah, that was just for the beginning, some organizational matters. And so now I will start with the actual presentation. So that's the agenda of today's webinar. In the first session, I will talk about use cases for taxonomies based on SKOS Core and mainly SKOS-XL, which is the latest addition to the modeling module of PoolParty. I will give a live demo on that, so you will see how that works concretely within our software. Then I would like to give you a deep dive into PoolParty's corpus analysis, especially the one of the latest developments we've made is about the co-occurrences analysis, which offers nice ways to extend taxonomies and thesauri semi-automatically. So I will show you how that works. Then I will give you a big picture about the PoolParty Semantic Integrator. So how that works, what's new. So that this configuration level is since a couple of years on the market, but we have added some, I believe, some exciting new features. I'd like to introduce you to them. And at the end, I will also give you a quick overview over the roadmap 2016, some upcoming events, and other hopefully interesting stuff around our product suite. So let's start with SKOS-XL. What is it good for and how does it work? Just a quick reminder, most of you most probably will be familiar with SKOS Core. So SKOS is one of the semantic web standards based on RDF published by the W3C. And it's quite simple, as the S is standing for the Simple Knowledge Organization System. So we've got concepts, we've got many concepts, and we can organize the concepts by putting relations in between, non-hierarchical relations and also hierarchical relations. So it's obviously good for taxonomy management. And every concept, each concept can have different labels and other literals attached. So that's all standardized. So of course, the most important label is always the preferred label. And then you can attach synonyms, so-called alternative labels. So that's really simple. That's already quite expressive. Of course, you cannot do many things you might be interested in only with SKOS. And that's important to know. PoolParty is much more than just a SKOS editor, but in reality, whenever you take a look on let's say, practice-related projects on the semantic web, we've seen it's a good way to start first with SKOS and then extend the knowledge graph step by step by ontologies, by custom schemes, by mappings to other linked data sources. And now there's a new way to extend your SKOS Core model, and that's based on SKOS-XL. So what is SKOS-XL? First of all, it's again part of the standard provided by W3C. It actually was published together with SKOS a couple of years ago. There's a myth around SKOS-XL on the web. When you look up SKOS-XL, some people argue it's not good for anything. It's everything you can do with SKOS-XL, you can also do with SKOS or with other means. And that's not true. So let's take a look on the anatomy of SKOS-XL, and then I will introduce you to use cases, and then it becomes obvious that that's a very interesting way to model knowledge, or a clear extension to what's already in place. So again, you've got the SKOS concepts, but now, and that's the main addition to SKOS Core, you get SKOS-XL labels as a resource, and that's why it's also a blue circle now. So you see every label can now be used as a resource in your knowledge graph. So you see the basic relation between a SKOS concept and a label now has kind of an intermediary step, but you will see that makes a lot of sense very quickly. So in this little example, you now see the United States dollar, which is the preferred label of this concept, has got its own identity and has become a resource. So what can you do with this first initial structure then? As you can see, I transformed that into SKOS-XL labels. All of those are now resources you can attach further information. And that's the first use case. You can introduce attributes to your labels. So for instance, you can now say that USD is an ISO code for United States dollar. Or you can say that this literal here is a symbol for the dollar. And you couldn't do that here, of course, because you cannot attach any additional information to a literal in an RDF knowledge graph. So you cannot really say anything about the labels anymore. The only knowledge you've got probably is that that's the preferred label and that's an alternative label. Nothing else can be expressed with SKOS only. So that's what's the first use case, what it is good for. You can classify by that your labels, and therefore they become specific attributes. A second use case, what if labels are used in a different context, which have probably different relations? So here's a little example. Here we introduce, by the way, also already FIBO. I will talk about that later. That's a custom ontology mainly used in the financial industry. So you will also see how to mix ontologies with SKOS-XL. But what I'd like to point to here in this example is this currency here, again, is mainly called the United States dollar. You've got, again, this label, which is, as we already know, an ISO code. But then there are kind of nicknames for major currencies like dollar. For instance, COCO. COCO is the name for the US dollar, mainly used in Peru. And in Peru only. So you cannot say that that's in general a nickname. It's rather a nickname in a special geographical area, and you can express that by this SKOS-XL construction. So you say, okay, it's an alt label or it's a hidden label. You can make a decision on that, and it's called COCO, and it's a nickname in Peru. So here I introduced a custom property, and I will later talk about that, how you can do that, and I will show you that very on a concrete example within PoolParty. So I will log in a second into the software itself, but first I guess it's important that you see the use cases of SKOS-XL. What else? We can introduce any kind of property between labels. So we could, for instance, say that a certain label in a certain language is translated by another label. So for instance, with Switzerland, it doesn't really make sense to make a direct translation between Switzerland and Schweizerische Eidgenossenschaft or Swiss Confederation and Schweiz, because that's not actually the translation. It only takes place between those two labels. So that's what you can say here with this property called translates. Or another example would be is predecessor of. A label could be the name for something not used anymore, but it was the preferred label in former days, most probably. So you could say, and that's the case with Switzerland, actually the Swiss Confederation is not really used anymore. It's the predecessor of the new name of this country, which is Switzerland. And I can express that by this relation type I introduced here. And of course, again, you could not do that with any means when you use SKOS only. So that's another use case. And then, of course, if you start thinking about combining all those things or combining SKOS-XL with text mining facilities, you could attach several linguistic properties on each label, and so on and so forth. So SKOS-XL offers quite a huge variety of new ways to make use of knowledge graphs. Let's take a look here, maybe on this other example. You can reuse labels in a multiple way, which means Switzerland probably is a label you would like to use in two different contexts. So there's a financial center, a financial place called Switzerland, which has it in its center Zurich. As a plain geographical entity, you could also name it Swiss Confederation, which is not in use in this context when it's a FIBO class location, because then we talk about financial services in the financial industry, and in this case only Switzerland would be used. So what's very important when you create a knowledge graph, of course, is that all your labels stay consistent in a way. So, and probably you don't want to have to change them at several places if you reuse them for different reasons. And as you can see here, Switzerland actually is really used in two different contexts. Here, as I've said, in the financial services industry, and here in a more general way. But the label here will always remain the same. Okay, so that was just a theory behind SKOS-XL. It's something which is not really new, actually, when you look at the date issued. But what's interesting for me to see is that more and more of our customers are now asking for SKOS-XL and other ways to extend the SKOS model. And that's a clear indicator also that it's more and more, let's say, going into a more mature stage where you could say, okay, people have been working with several ontologies for a while, and now they'd like to integrate that with other modeling paradigms. And you will see also in the next section that it's very straightforward also and intuitively possible to create SKOS-XL in combination with ontologies or use them in combination with ontologies. I will also show you that. So how does it look in PoolParty? How can you create a SKOS-XL label, for instance? That's quite straightforward. So here I just walk you quickly through the screenshots and then I will log in. So here, for instance, you see the view on a SKOS-XL label. You can create from there label relations. You could see here as a very convenient dialogue how this label is used or some metadata around that. And now I will show you how that looks like in PoolParty. So I log in and I will open up this model I've just showed you in theory. So that's the SKOS view, the SKOS tree. Here on the left-hand side, you see 3 different concept schemes. There are currencies like the United States dollar. So here you've got the relation types and here the labels. And now let's take a look in contrast to the US dollar. We go to pound sterling. And you see here, that's a simple SKOS preferred label. So I can add here maybe a synonym like pound. And if you take a look on the United States dollar here, that's not a simple label. It's a SKOS-XL label. And that's why you can click on this resource. So what happened now is this United States dollar I just clicked on was now put into this quick link bar, as we call that. So here you can very easily access all the SKOS-XL labels you've used recently. If you want to get the whole overview, just click here on this node. So here you see all the SKOS-XL labels you've recently used. You can sort them. You see when they were created, when they were last modified. You can search over it and filter it. Should be. So here you see you can traverse also the network of SKOS-XL labels here. And you see how they are used. So for instance, Switzerland, I just showed you the example, is used in 2 different contexts. So it's used as a geographical entity or label for a geographical entity and as a label for a specific entity, which is of class financial center. So how to make a SKOS-XL label? So one way to do that is simply click on the edit button and convert this SKOS label into a SKOS-XL label. So that's one thing. Now from now on, it's a SKOS-XL label and you see it has received a UI. And now you can do all those things I've just showed you before. So for instance, those are the relation types I created, which for instance is nickname in or is predecessor of, translates and so on, is ISO code, is symbol. So that's not the case with that, but I could introduce here, for instance, alternative label GPP, and that's an ISO code for pound sterling. So I can transform that into a SKOS-XL label. Go here to the label types. You see here, those are the standard SKOS-XL relations. Like with SKOS, you've got your predefined set of relations and attributes. In this case, with SKOS-XL labels, it's not that many. You have here label relations and literal form. And here, in this case, you see in this box in which context this label has been used so far. So now I can go to my own custom properties and attributes, and here I now set that to is ISO code true, save, and now it's clear that it's not just any synonym but a very specific one. Okay, so that's a little bit about the handling. I will come back in a second when I show you some advanced features. So which advanced features do we have? First of all, SKOS-XL is fully embedded into the workflow engine of PoolParty. So it always has been used as a workflow engine for SKOS label management and relation management, but now it was also extended to include all the SKOS-XL label management. So here, for instance, you see the dashboard, you see all the draft concepts, which are asserted to my user account. Since I'm here as an administrator logged in, I would see also all the draft concepts of anybody else. So I can monitor that, or can assign draft concepts to other experts working on this knowledge graph and taxonomy. And the same is valid for the SKOS-XL labels. So here you see all the draft SKOS-XL labels which are attached to my account and so on. So that's the dashboard, and you also see here, for instance, the SKOS-XL view. You could see, or you could from here you could assign the label to a colleague. You could approve that if your role allows that. So let's take a look on that, how that looks like. Therefore, I open another project in which the workflows are already activated. I can do that quite easily here in this workflow settings dialog. I could, whenever I like, I can initialize workflows or disable the workflows. And there are a couple of things I can set some rules. For instance, here, if all the proof concepts should be set to draft, or if all the SKOS-XL labels should set to status draft. You can also say, okay, if some labels or this label management should affect all related concepts or not, or just the XL labels should be affected by the workflow engine and so on. So there are a couple of things, maybe that goes too much into detail, but here you can set some rules. But in general, here's the workflow dashboard. So you see here draft concepts. You can look up, for instance, the history first and see what happened when the concept was created. There was a custom relation attached and so on. So you can really make a decision if you would like to now approve that or assign it to a colleague or not. You can also say approve all concepts. So let's approve that one. I can put here a note and say, okay, all done, and save that. And from then on, it's an approved SKOS concept, and the same thing is valid for the SKOS-XL labels. So I could do the same thing here. Okay, so that's the workflow engine, which is now fully integrated also with the SKOS-XL module. Here are the setting of the workflow rules I was talking briefly about. And now I would like to let you revisit a little bit our ontology and custom schema management. A couple of things turned out to be very, let's say, convenient for the daily work with PoolParty, but others probably stayed a bit confusing for our clients, and therefore we made a clearer distinction now between the ontology layer and the custom schema layer. And that's one of the things we introduced in the latest release, and I'd like to explain that to you, how that works. So let's take a look here on an example. PoolParty's ontology management is, I would call it a three-layered approach. On the basic layer, you will use ontologies as a library, as a basic knowledge layer in which ontologies and their classes, properties, and attributes are maintained to be propagated one layer on top, which is the custom schema layer, in which you most probably would mesh or create a mesh of several classes you defined in your ontology layer. So the custom schema then is finally the schema you apply on your taxonomy. And that's what you see right here. So for instance, here a custom class is applied on this SKOS concept. And you can do that also on whole subgraphs. So that will be attached or applied recursively. And you see here, for instance, here now this node in your knowledge graph, which is a SKOS concept still, is now also a FIBO currency. And by that, you get some additional ways to make relations between your classified nodes in your knowledge graph. Let's take a look on that. So for instance, I might go back to the other project which hasn't got the workflows included. So let's take a look, for instance, on the United States dollar once again. You see here, it's it's a currency. You see here we reuse, of course, the original URI of this class, which is down here. It's FIBO is a ontology mainly defined by the EDM Council and partly also supported by OMG, and it's a very, would say, extensive ontology which describes several entity types in the financial industry, and one of this is currency. So the currency in the FIBO model, as I've defined it, or as it's defined, could, for instance, be related to locations, FIBO locations, by the property is tendering, right? So the US dollar is tendering not only in the United States, but for instance also in El Salvador. So how was that defined? Let's take a look on the ontology first. So that's these two tabs here. You can create your own ontologies. You can import ontologies from other servers, or you could add them from a predefined library. So here you see a couple of broadly used ontologies which are available by default. And of course, this library can always be extended. So two ontologies are always on a PoolParty server. Of course, that's the SKOS ontology and the SKOS-XL ontology. They're always on the server. That's the precondition. So here the FIBO ontology, for instance, currency, you see here, for instance, is domain of, is tender in, or is range of, has base money unit. And here, for instance, you see the relation I just showed you. Currency is tender in location, and location again is a class here defined further down. And now with this plus sign, or you can do that also as a whole, you can create a schema or a new class out of this ontology. And that's now propagated into the, in this case, it's the same name, it could be another name, into the FIBO schema, right? So in the FIBO schema now has here also currency. But you see here this little symbol in front, which indicates, okay, that's actually linked to this class defined in the ontology. But now you can mesh it with other ontologies or classes from ontologies. That's the nice way to propagate in a consistent way your ontologies throughout your knowledge graphs. And the last step here really is that you can classify nodes by saying, okay, attach a certain custom class to this node, or you can apply it on the whole subtree, or if you do it on the concept scheme level, so in that case, it's already attached. So everything here is a currency. So what does it mean also from a modeling perspective? It, for instance, would mean now that I cannot put here anything like, let's say, I couldn't put there a simple geo entity. It's not possible because it's attached to a FIBO location, and therefore it can be linked with such only. Otherwise, the engine doesn't allow the linking. The same thing I can do with SKOS-XL labels. So let's take a look on that. For instance, Swiss franc. Here I defined label types ontology. And that's what I just showed you before. So that's again its own ontology. We can take a look here. It consists, for instance, of my labels. Here a couple of things are defined. For instance, attributes like is ISO code, and in the corresponding schema, which is here, you see again, here are the corresponding attributes. But for instance, I also introduce spatial thing from the geo-ontology. And I say, okay, this SKOS-XL label can be linked to any spatial thing via user's nickname. That was this Peru example, as you might remember. So as you can see, you can mesh your custom schema from several existing ontologies. Of course, also your custom-made ontologies. So that's the summarization on that principle. You've got the ontology layer. Could be from a library which is pre-installed on PoolParty. You could most probably have imported it from some other resources, or it's a custom-made ontology. Now you reuse classes, properties, attributes from there in your custom schemes. So that's why this symbol here that's the custom-made ones. You cannot change, for instance, the ontologies from the library. And the custom schemes, last but not least, are attached to your taxonomy. And by that pretty simple approach, you can extend your taxonomy, which originally was based on SKOS only, step by step, by SKOS-XL, by custom properties, custom classes, custom attributes, and so on and so forth. So once again, as a summarization, we've seen here, for instance, the example that the United States dollar has got, in that case, a class attached called currency. That's what you can see here. I derived that certain example from the FIBO ontology. Then we can attach here custom properties between the labels. You've seen this, for instance, is predecessor of or is successor of, translates, and so on. And you can use your custom attributes to express of which kind a label is, for instance. So here I created my own label ontology, and by that I can now express, for instance, if a label is an ISO code or not. Yeah, and as a last part of this SKOS-XL section, I'd like to talk very briefly about what's there, who is using that already, and so on. So, I mean, one of the most probably widely used taxonomies, at least in the European Union, but also by governments around the world, is the EuroWOC, the multilingual thesaurus of the European Union. And it's mainly based on SKOS-XL. So you can, of course, take a look on it and reuse it on your own. That's an obvious use case. It's of course very well developed thesaurus. It covers 23 languages. Another example, which is of course also broadly adapted, is the AgriWOC, which was issued many years ago, but constantly improved by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. It includes quite a lot of, I would say, very important topics like food and nutrition, agriculture, and it's available in 16. It's available in not only 16 languages, but it's linked to 16 other multilingual knowledge graphs from the linked open data cloud. And it's also mainly based on SKOS-XL. And another source I'd like to point to is probably not that well known, which is the ESCO thesaurus, the European Skills, Competence, Qualifications, and Occupations thesaurus, which can be reused for several HR and recruiting tasks by many different organization types, I would say. It's an extensive thesaurus also, which is mainly based on SKOS-XL. So I'd like to invite you, of course, to give it a try on your own, so you can get your own test account on our website. I just would like to indicate that that's quite easily possible to give it a try. Okay, so that was I would say the first round, and now the second biggest improvement we've been working on in the latest releases, which is about how to support taxonomies by let's say semi-automatic mechanisms to extend the taxonomy and control vocabulary continuously. So that's the main principle of PoolParty's corpus management. As you can see here, there's a reference corpus. You can build reference corpora for any domain. There are several tools for that I will show you. Could be derived from websites, from PDF collections, from DBpedia. And PoolParty is going to analyze those reference corpora. And what the result is looks like that, more or less. So it calculates relevant terms and phrases, and also the relevancy of concepts. You remember, a concept is part of the taxonomy and of the knowledge graph, in contrast to the term. A term is not a concept yet, but of course it could become a candidate concept first and then an approved concept. And let's say that the size of the fonts also indicate, okay, we can calculate with PoolParty the significance or the importance of a term for this certain domain model, and also the relatedness or the co-occurrence between the terms and the concepts. So that's basically what's stored in the RDF triple store. So with PoolParty we store everything virtually as a triple, and therefore also this linguistic model or statistical language model we derive from the reference corpus analysis is stored as an RDF model. And as a next step, with some sophisticated Sparkle queries, we can calculate some interesting, let's say, attributes automatically around terms and concepts, which helps the taxonomists to extend the thesaurus. And that's the basic steps. So from the reference corpus, you derive terms, and from the terms, you can decide whether you want to make a candidate concept out of that. And last but not least, you can attach it to a SKOS concept or make a SKOS concept out of it. And then, of course, from there, you can further extend it, as I've shown you, with custom schemas, ontologies, SKOS-XL, and things like that. So how does it work? First of all, you most probably have to create a reference text corpus. So there are several ways to do that. You see here a couple of things like upload documents. You can crawl websites. You can crawl RSS feeds. You can crawl DBpedia. But you could also add your own way to create a reference corpus by creating a connector to your, let's say, document management system. You most probably don't want to upload or crawl everything you've got in your company or in your organization, but rather, representative bunch of documents which are the basis for a reference model of your language. From there, PoolParty is going to calculate statistics, as I've just shown you, like co-occurrences about concepts, frequencies, and some other things, distributedness, and so on. And as a result, and you can do that for every of your domain models, you can calculate as many corpora as you like. And as a result, it produces, first of all, lists. The first list is the list of the most frequently used concepts in your text corpus. That's a nice indicator of which of your, let's say, parts and segments of your taxonomy are most representative for your actual content basis. But you could also look up, okay, which concepts were not found in your corpus, which is also interesting. Most probably a synonym is missing, or it's misspelled, or it's probably an outdated label you've attached to your concept, or it's just not important and you can probably leave it as it is. As another next step, you most probably look up some, again, representative documents, and from there you could assign new candidate concepts by just clicking on the plus sign. Like in that case, by the way, we did an analysis over descriptions of UNESCO cultural heritage sites. So, you know, there are a couple of hundreds of such heritage sites, and what you find here, for instance, are things like Khmer Empire or city or Siem Reap and so on. So from here, you really can see, okay, which concepts are used and which potential new candidate concepts could be derived. That's done per document, or again, you get a list of candidate concepts. These are, of course, sorted by relevancy. That's done by PoolParty automatically. You don't have to go through all of these candidate concepts. You really can work step by step the most important ones and go down and further down. And you first of all, you put them here into this candidate concepts area. And from here, you can now start to include them into your thesaurus. So here, for instance, I added Buddhist as a candidate concept. And what's calculated as a next step are the co-occurrences. So for instance, potential synonyms like Buddhism. Buddhism could become a synonym for Buddhist. So you just drag and drop it here. As a next step, you could derive from the co-occurrences once again candidate concepts to make them related to other candidate concepts, in that case Hindu, for instance. So put Hindu here into the candidate concepts list and make it related to Buddhist, and so on. So you really start to create kind of a sub thesaurus from the text analysis, and then step by step you can include them into your approved part of your thesaurus. So you see here, for instance, we've got already a structure like sites by type. So there are cultural sites, which are cultural heritage, and there are also natural sites and mixed sites. That's a classification done by the UNESCO. And then further down you see, okay, for instance, spiritual places, temples, Buddhist temple. And now I would like to assert Buddhist as a sub-concept of Buddhist temple. Therefore, I only have to put that as a broader concept. And now you see an integrate button appears. So now you can think about integrating your micro sub-thesaurus. And you get a dialogue like that. And since I've attached Buddhist to Hindu, it will ask me also if I want to attach also the related concepts. And I say, yeah, why not? And now I've got two new concepts in my thesaurus. And that's some valuable new information, which I could, for instance, reuse for my semantic search engine I have generated in the background. So as you can see here, there is a little example again on this descriptions of the cultural heritage sites, and now I've got a new facet called Buddhist. I wouldn't have that before. Let's take a look on that on the live server. So that's the as we call the PoolParty graph search module based on an annotated document collection. And you can see here there are different facets which are derived from the thesaurus structure. I can look up for, in this case, Buddhist. I've now introduced. And you can see now there are 50 such heritage sites in different contexts. Once again, it could be a temple, it could be a mountain, it could be a monastery, it could be even a river. Let's go to a mountain maybe, and then I can further drill down only those in Japan, and so on. And that's one way why such an addition to your thesaurus is of value, because your search most probably becomes more faceted, more specific. And that's something which can nicely be supported by this co-occurrency model calculated in the background. And most probably, when you look at, let's say, larger projects, PoolParty will be integrated in your content workflows, and you can push such new documents instantly or continuously into the corpus analysis via the PoolParty API. So it really helps you to keep your thesaurus up to date and somehow aligned and in sync with your actual content workflows. So yeah, that was the second part of my webinar, of my little presentation about what's new with PoolParty 5.2 and 5.3. And now we come to an end of the webinar, more or less. It's going to be the last section of this presentation, which is rather shorter than the other two. And please feel free, if you have any questions, put it into the questions section of the GoToMeeting software, or I will open up the microphones after the presentation, and please stay with me and we might discuss something interesting. So here is one thing I'd like to point to. It's a new video. First of all, it's not about the software only when improvements and when innovations should be done, or the technology itself. It should be also about the services around that, which are important to understand and make the best out of the software. And one very important cornerstone of that is, of course, how to explain how the software can be used. So we tried our best to put together the main functionality of PoolParty in a video, which only takes 3 minutes. I'd like to invite you to watch that video after maybe that presentation or somewhere later. So the link here is included. You will get the link, of course, sent after this webinar also, or if you have already downloaded one of the handouts, you will find the link also, or just on our YouTube channel. So I'd like to invite you to watch that and enjoy. It briefly describes what PoolParty can do for you. And it's mainly about the semantic integrator. And here I want to wrap up once again, what is it at a glance? So of course, it's clear PoolParty is a knowledge graph management environment. It can support taxonomy and ontology management. But if you look at the whole platform, at the whole suite, you can do much more than that. PoolParty is a tool which really helps you to put together various data sets and bring up a consistent view on all of the data you have analyzed. It could be unstructured data, it could be structured data. And here, that's probably something you might not be that familiar with. A new component has been integrated into the PoolParty product family, and it will be integrated more and more in a couple of next months. So by the end of the year, unified views will be more or less fully integrated within PoolParty. At the moment, you can use it already very nicely as an integrated bundle of components. One thing we want to introduce in the next couple of months also is a more integrated graphical user interface, so you don't have to switch between the two tools. That's one thing which will happen, but from a functional perspective, it's already everything in place. So unified views as a RDF-based ETL tool helps you to schedule different transformation tasks. Some of them, or many of them, most probably will be fulfilled by PoolParty Extractor and based on the ontologies and vocabularies you've created or you are continuously update, as I've shown you. And as a result, all your data from different sources will be transformed into a linked knowledge graph based on RDF. And then there are two ways, more or less, how to make further or make use of that in a further step, in the next step. So we now work together with our 4 graph database vendors or partners which are graph database vendors. So those 4 systems are fully integrated with PoolParty Semantic Integrator. And those 4 partners with their technologies offer a really good and very excellent basis to do deep data analytics based on W3C standards. So that's the one application type which is supported or provided by this architecture. And the second, let's say, type or class of application is, I would say, still more or less in the following the tradition of semantic search. Therefore, you most probably don't need necessarily the RDF graph database technology under the hood, but probably some other very well developed technologies like, for instance, MarkLogic or Apache Solr or Elasticsearch. As you can see, MarkLogic is a technology which can really be used for both of these scenarios. Let's rephrase that. It makes sense to use MarkLogic for both of those scenarios. For instance, with Virtuoso, Stardock, or Ontotext, I see a lot of opportunities for deep data analytics. In contrast to that, for instance, an Apache Solr most probably is not the right base technology to do such kind of applications. So that's really great technology for, let's say, document-oriented semantic search, but not that much when it comes to, let's say, analytics around business objects and business entities. So therefore, the RDF data model makes really a lot of sense. So yeah, that's more or less the flow from your raw data sources to a linked data warehouse. And unified views is the layer in which you schedule all these transformation tasks, and you can monitor what has been done in your pipelines. And that's how it looks like from a user perspective. So you can really define your transformation pipelines. And I'd like also to say welcome once again to Thomas Knapp. He joined recently the Semantic Web Company team, the PoolParty team, and he's the core developer of Unified Views, or has been the core developer for many, many years. So Unified Views has been developed by several organizations in recent years and has now a really mature status, so it can be used for enterprise data transformation and enterprise linked data warehouse projects very well. And I'm proud to have Thomas in our team now. And some upcoming and I would say also major events in the linked data industry I'd like to point to. An upcoming event is a webinar, which is in a couple of days only. It's a webinar we do together with our partner MarkLogic, 2 cornerstones of semantics. Please find some time to watch this webinar. You will see how PoolParty has been integrated with MarkLogic in different ways, and what's the benefit by this approach for the end users. We will show concrete examples how that can be used. In June, there is MarkLogic World in London. We will be there with a booth. So if you're around, please make sure you come and visit us. September, there's a 12th time, is Semantics On. It's most probably the largest linked data and semantic web conference for the industry-oriented people. Of course, there's still some academic conferences on in that area, but semantics really is that place to come when you see how you can use this kind of technology and meet same-minded people there. That's in September. And in November, if you're around somewhere in the DC area, I would be happy to meet you at our booth at Taxonomy Bootcamp and KM World, as we might have met already last year. So those are a couple of events, and that's about it. And I hope you enjoyed the webinar. And as I've said before, I will now try to answer questions if there are some put in the question section, and then I will turn on the microphones. If somebody is still left in the room, I'd be happy to continue this webinar with some question answering or questions or whatever. So thank you very much for your time and your interest. I will now stop also the recording. This will all be on YouTube later, and feel free to stay with me a couple